Welcome everybody. Hi, I'm Sue Flockey, and I'm Associate Director at the Prevention Research Center for Healthy Neighborhoods. Welcome. This is our monthly seminar. It is good to see everybody here. Happy spring. I'm excited to introduce today's speaker for our seminar series, and that we've invited a guest from outside the university and outside the area, and this is a colleague that Dr. Anesetti-Rothermel has been collaborating with over the last couple of years, and has strongly encouraged us to invite, and we're delighted to have him here. Before I get into that background, if you've not been here to the seminar series, welcome. We have this on a monthly basis, and have topics on prevention and health promotion, and issues of public health. There is a sign-in sheet. If you didn't sign in, please remember to do that. It helps us keep track of who we're reaching and who's attending, and it also allows us to be able to contact you for future events and topics that might be of interest to you, both for this seminar and other activities that the Prevention Research Center for Healthy Neighborhoods sponsors. If you have suggestions for topics, or you yourself would like to present at one of these sessions, I certainly welcome that. And please contact me or contact Susan through the PRC, and we can follow up on that and hopefully make that happen. So today's presenter is Dr. Anesetti-Rothermel, and he's a GIS manager at the Schroeder Institute for Tobacco Research and Policy Studies. And that's actually embedded within the Truth Initiative. His doctorate's in epidemiology with a master's in public health, and he got those from West Virginia. And actually, he was telling me that he had a connection there with the PRC, the Prevention Research Center in West Virginia, and with people that Elaine has worked with in the past. So that's great. His research is predominantly focuses on survey analysis, ecological momentary assessment, and exposure to tobacco marketing. He's done store audits and working with geospatial data. And today he's going to be presenting data around understanding behaviors and decision making in the content of both when and where neighborhood level and individual level exposures to retail tobacco environment. And the presentation, I think what you're presenting on, maybe you've modified this a little bit, is work around 33 schools and the retail environment around schools. So with that, welcome.
Thanks. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Thanks to Erica and to the PRC for having me here. It's a great opportunity. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so I'm sorry, but Cleveland can wear on me. Today I'm going to talk about modeling the tobacco retail environment. I'm going to cover the study that was initially on the flyer, kind of at the end, but I wanted to go over kind of the principles and the approaches that are actually used in more depth, and it is kind of a complex topic, and I kind of wanted to simplify it and kind of provide a teaching opportunity as well. So why the tobacco retail environment? So since the Master Settlement Agreement, tobacco companies have become more dependent on the retail environment to market their products. The prevalence of interior and exterior tobacco advertising has increased significantly, as well as cigarette promotions such as multi-pack promotions, gift with purchase, as well as cents-off promotions has also increased significantly, as well as functional items. Functional items are those little cool branded leave a penny, share a penny kind of things by the cash register. And in 2004, the tobacco industry spent about $8.5 billion on tobacco marketing nationwide. And a vast majority, 80% of that, or $6.7 billion, are price discounts paid to tobacco retailers as well as wholesalers to reduce the cost. So when you see 50 cents off a pack, the retailer is actually keeping that cost, and the tobacco companies are actually paying that difference. Sure.
What is outlined in the Master Settlement Agreement?
The Master Settlement Agreement restricts sponsorships and promotional activities, bans tobacco billboarding, bans cartoons, usage to sell and market products, and also restricts exterior marketing to no more than 14 square feet.
Thank you.
So inside, specifically, the most common and influential form of tobacco marketing is known as point-of-sale tobacco marketing. It's advertised, created around impulse purchasing. It's the reason why when you walk and check out of your Walmart, there's candy bars and gum right there, because it's designed to capture your attention, and it's especially around the checkout. 83% of the cigarette advertisements found within the retail space is actually considered point-of-sale tobacco marketing, which has emerged as the primary market approach to target youth. It's associated, and several systematic reviews have found that it's actually associated with the likelihood that youth will actually initiate smoking. For example, youth that actually visit stores twice a week that contain tobacco marketing actually double their odds of initiating cigarette smoking. And this is probably because tobacco marketing practices have been found to distort youth perceptions about the availability, the use, and the popularity of tobacco use. Mm-hmm. So that's considered point of sale. So the power walls, when you're at a gas station, those power walls behind, that's all point of sale tobacco marketing. That is in your face at the checkout to stimulate you unconsciously to possibly purchase. Some of the work that we've found is the more contacts people come into of people that are actually trying to quit in a cessation trial, the more contacts, while they had low craving, the more contacts they had actually triggered a relapse. However, if they had high craving, it didn't matter. They were going to relapse anyways. So people that are actually on the progression to quit, the more contacts they have, even though they have low cravings, actually it's influencing. So research and advocacy groups have worked to understand the potential and benefits of controlling the number of tobacco retailers, so the availability of the retail tobacco. So that is tobacco outlet density as well as the proximity to various use spaces, schools, parks, playgrounds, etc. However, these studies have only been found with limited success. The findings vary from study to study, data set to data set, and method to method. But overall, the available evidence suggests that the higher tobacco outlet density provides a greater physical access to tobacco because of two reasons. It increases the access by reducing travel distance and related search costs to the consumer. So it actually decreases the overall net cost associated with actually purchasing the product, as well as the overall price actually decreases because of consumer interaction. So the competition between retailers to actually get people in their stores actually drives down the prices. It also co-occurs with numerous demographic and socioeconomic factors associated with increased tobacco use. And it's magnified in urban areas where even after controlling for population size, urban areas and metropolitan areas tend to have 32% more tobacco retailers than non-metro areas. And also, the big key thing is neighborhoods with a higher concentration of tobacco outlets also tend to have a higher proportion of youth. So again, as I said, the findings are kind of limited. They kind of vary, and it kind of results from kind of these two instances. So the links between the availability of retail tobacco and smoking need to distinguish between tobacco outlet density across the entire region, not within egocentric or politically defined boundaries such as census tracts or half miles. And also, we need to look at the immediate proximity of tobacco outlets to youth. Few studies have systematically contrasted the interrelationships of both density and proximity. And it's actually kind of finding, I was actually telling somebody that I met with today. One study found that density actually was associated with increased smoking, but not proximity. 2 years later, another study came out that found proximity was associated, but not density. Separated by 2 years, and this is 2012-2014 research. So we need to, and what these approaches technically fail to do is they ignore all the outlets that do not happen to fall within the specified school or home boundaries. That's a typo. So we fail to capture youth access as occurs across the whole retail tobacco environment. And this is a main issue, and it's a complex, well-known geography problem known as a modifiable area unit problem. So for example, if we use zip codes to define neighborhoods, zip codes are actually optimized for postal delivery service. They might not correspond to the boundaries we're actually thinking about of a neighborhood. Electoral districts are optimized for what they quote and consider ideal representations of the population, but they don't fall along natural occurring socioeconomic boundaries. While census units are optimized for enumeration, however, all blocks aim just to have the same number of people in it. It's just how many people they can fit. There is no natural defined neighborhood. So I actually provide an example of this. So we have 1,440 voters. There's 30 voters per box. We're going to divide it into 6 districts of 240 voters each. There's 400 orange voters, 400 purple voters, and 640 green voters. What you see now is there's actually 3 orange districts, 3 purple districts, and 0 green districts, even though the majority of voters is actually green. One more time, breaking up the same data again, we get 6 green districts, 0 orange, and 0 purple. And we'll do this one more time, and we get 4 green, 1 orange, and 1 purple. This is a common and well-known problem to geography. It needs to be addressed. It's commonly not addressed, and it's hardly mentioned in studies. So to counteract this, kind of propose an alternative approach. It's a retail-centric approach where when we look at schools and buffers around schools, that's considered a school-centric approach or a home-centric approach. And it's to use tobacco outlets themselves as the unit of analysis. This also increases your power. So, for example, 33 schools would have been my power, but since I used a retail-centric approach, it's 247, I think, is actually the sample size. Including the proximity and/or density to home or schools, as well as the range of other factors that vary between outlets, tobacco marketing, pricing, the amount of flavor ads, pack promotions, etc. And we need to focus on the retail tobacco availability, density, and proximity, again, across the whole study area, not just within where we think youth are, but all the possibilities that they could actually move. Because while home and school are a good indicator of behaviors, their neighborhoods where they play and their friends' houses are also important neighborhoods that need to be captured. And additionally, we need to systematically contrast the interrelationships between density and proximity to youth activity spaces across that whole study area as well. So how do we go about using this retail-centric approach to calculate tobacco outlet density and proximity? So for tobacco outlet density, to actually look at accessibility or availability, we want to use a static bandwidth kernel density approach. This is a non-parametric approach that extrapolates point location data over the entire study area by calculating the density of points using a specified bandwidth. So it's a circle of a given radius centered at a specific location, and you count the points that fall in with that specific radius. And this produces actually a continuous density surface where every location, for example, every 30 meters actually has a density value associated to it. So kind of complex. Let's break it down a little bit. So kernel density estimation, to find the density of points across a region, we're actually turning a set of points, which in geography is known as an object, and we're going to translate it into a surface or a field. So we want to take a point and imagine a mound of dirt on top of it. That mound could be the same height for all points, so if the buffer around how many points had fallen, if it's 1, they would all be the same height. And now we just continue stacking dirt. So if there's 4 inside that circle, we keep stacking it. And we get this representation. And that is your density surface, your resulting density surface. But there are numerous questions that you need to think in advance, such as what is actually the kernel shape used. Typically in the retail environment we use a Gaussian kernel. An exponential would be used for like kind of a toxic chemical release where it has a high but low dispersal rate. And a constant rate would be kind of like particulate matter over an area. Additionally, the main question is, what is the radius actually used to define? A lot of the research with specifically a school environment models walking distance, and they say it's a 1/4 mile. And you see this in paper after paper after paper, and they all cite the same article, but they don't actually cite the original article. If you actually look at the original article, it's based on like a 1990 transportation survey that said 1/4 mile was average walking distance, and they keep citing it. For the radius approach that we use, we base it off the household transportation survey of shopping, which is 6.5 miles. So any mode of transportation is typically 6.5 miles from point to point. It is a little outdated. It's 2003. 2016 is in the process of actually being released by the National Household Transportation Survey, so that will obviously change. It could increase, it could decrease.
Can I just ask what that is? That for both urban and rural combined?
Yes. It's rural-urban combined, and the reason why I chose 6.5, a lot of our data sets is national. If you actually look at urban and the urban-rural differences, I did it with a colleague, Heather Carlos, who actually does a lot. She actually has a premier article on actually explaining kernel density estimation. She's at the University of Dartmouth. And some of their studies by James Sargent's group, they use 1 kilometer, and they just don't provide a rationale. And it gets into this next question. So they chose, yes?
When you consider radius, do you consider the type of neighborhood you're looking at?
No.
For example, in East Cleveland, there's a low incidence of people with cars.
Mm-hmm.
And in other places, virtually everybody has at least 1 car per household. And
So we would want to model it across all of Cleveland, not just within a neighborhood specific. We would derive a neighborhood estimate, but it's based on the outlets across all of Cleveland, because they might take a bus. They might not have a car, but they might take a bus to work that's 3 neighborhoods over. An average person is willing to travel and walk 5 miles to the nearest public transportation, and that's commonly cited in mobility, like calculating individuals' mobility environments. But the census, the 1 kilometer, kind of gets to this aspect of smoothing. So the 1 kilometer actually over-smoothed, and they actually found no findings, no results, no significant indicators of census tract, because they essentially over-smoothed the density surface. There was no variation in the cells to actually determine a difference, but if they're too small, you don't really even get a density surface at all. So there's a little, you want a rationale. There's also, in what I'm going to present later, is a term called optimizing your density surface, where you actually use multiple bandwidths. You calculate density numerous times, and then you pick the one that actually maximizes the kurtosis, where it's not too peaked and it's not too smoothed. And then you choose that as your bandwidth. Additionally, you can actually weight your density estimation, and I'll present this later using this same example. So outlets with no tobacco marketing don't even contribute to your surface, while outlets that have a lot of tobacco marketing actually contribute more to your surface. So it's actually counting that point based on what you're weighting it. And additionally, you have edge effects. Edge effects are a common issue. There's ways to get around it. So you have this outlet here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and if you notice, this outlet's right on the border. They would fall in the same bandwidth. That would get counted when you're calculating the density for that point. And they would overlap, but there's really nothing you can do. It's a limitation of your data. If you have national data sets like we do, when we calculate DC's density, we actually, it's called a fuzzy boundary. We actually extend the boundary around DC up to 6.5 miles, include those points, calculate the density across the whole study area, including the fuzzy boundary, and then clip to the DC and then make our estimates. Additionally, in most of the research, we see proximity is calculated as a Euclidean distance or straight line distance or crow flies distance, and this also biases estimates. So these are one picture, they are 1 mile by 1 mile blocks. Euclidean distance gives us a distance of 5 miles. However, we want to use a Manhattan distance approach or a network approach or straight line approach to model actual walkable access. And you can see you just misestimated by using straight line by 2 miles in your estimate. And this is kind of defined. So this is a network from a school to a couple retailers in miles. And if you actually look, the straight line, where's the one? That's off by 0.11 of a mile, so 1/10 of a mile just in your exposure estimate. And this one's off by over 1.5 miles. So I think I'm going kind of quick. Actually, not really. Any questions to this point?
I would just comment that one of the things supporting using the larger distance area is that the substance-seeking behavior that comes with addiction to substances like nicotine. People will go out of their way
Yes.
to get their fix with the substance addiction. It doesn't so much apply to initiation of tobacco use, but once you're hooked, you'll go where you need to go.
And we saw that, so that once I was talking about low craving and high craving. High craving, they were seeking the fastest point of sale they could when their craving was high, and that was done with EMA to actually assess the craving. And it was literally within the next 15 minutes they were at a point of sale location, probably buying tobacco. But again, that's where we can optimize the density and actually kind of find the best fit that you guys know Cleveland better than I do. So you would want to create a density surface that represents what the real world represents in your analysis. So there is some tweaking, but again, a lot of journals want a rationale behind your bandwidth. So that was why we chose the 6.5 mile. Yes?
About the to really extend on this point, it's great if you're using a national data set, so you can go as far out as you want. If you're doing ground truth method of data collection, usually there's some boundary. I mean, adding in an additional 6.5 miles around the perimeter of the edge is really a lot of data collection. So I guess what the pros and cons of having a grounded method versus relying on the nationally available
Yes.
data set.
So what I'm going to talk about now gets right at that. You guys have a tobacco retail licensure database that you can get from your Department of Health. West Virginia, they don't even have that at each county. So this is all ground truth. This is all me going out and collecting it. So this study examined the effects of tobacco retailer density and proximity to tobacco product marketing as well as pricing in 3 metropolitan and non-metropolitan counties in West Virginia.
Wait one, can I ask, so it does seem though that there would be a different approach for youth versus adults. Is that not true?
The household transportation survey actually includes youth. So it's anybody over the age of 5 is actually included in that estimate.
I just keep going back at the 2 comments I heard. It just strikes me as that, with kids in initiation, that may be, it seems like the proximity would be different than if you're already addicted and you're looking for the cheapest maybe, for example. So I'm just curious it does seem like they might be, you might draw it too big for youth if you're looking at youth initiation, and not big enough if you're looking at cessation.
You could be, but again, you're just modeling what the overall retail environment accessibility is, not actually what they're craving. So craving or seeking out. So you're just modeling the entire retail availability across the whole study area. And then you can change in the proximity of what estimates actually get included into that estimate. We looked at 33 public middle schools and high schools in 3 metro and 3 non-metro counties using this retail-centric approach to examine the degree tobacco retail density versus proximity to a public high school or middle school affected marketing and pricing practices independent of metro status within the surrounding county. So again, I talked about I had no tobacco retail licensure. I downloaded data from the NAICS Association for 2012. I used pretty much the common NAICS codes. They're the North American Industry Classification System codes. These identify a business by its primary business type. So supermarkets, other grocery stores, convenience stores, beer, wine, pharmacies and drugstores, other gas stations with convenience stores, as well as other gas stations. These other gas stations are like your small little garages that might have just a couple packs for sale behind the counter, and nobody really goes in. They just sell to Bob that works. The guy works on Bob's transmission every 3 months, as well as tobacco stores. I did field validation from October 2013 through November 2013. Driving to West Virginia from DC takes about 2.5 hours of doing nothing. And I assessed whether each outlet sold tobacco products, was named correctly, as well as it was geocoded accurately. So if it wasn't geocoded accurately, being that it was very rural areas, somewhere off by 5 miles, I actually moved the point to the correct location. Retail outlets that did not sell tobacco or were no longer in business, as well as proprietors' home addresses. I showed up at a lot of people's driveways, just following it in Garmin, were excluded. So that was 155 stores I excluded from this database. Additionally, while driving around, I identified and visited and verified an additional 77 stores that match these NAICS characteristics, geocoded them, added to the data set to actually get at the final tobacco retailer data set within these 6 counties of 276. As well at the store, I calculated the total amount of exterior tobacco marketing using a hand counter. I did multiple rounds of the hand counter until I reached concordance on 2 or more consecutive counts. And then I also calculated the lowest observed cigarette pack price actually using spyglasses that captured actually a 1 second 8 megapixel photo of the interior store, and it took about 2 minutes to capture the comprehensive retail environment. I'm in the process of actually machine learning those photos to actually identify brands and product types, as well as quantify that within the retail environment, and then I can go back and generate studies whether I want to look at little cigars, cigarillos, or smokeless tobacco. So it's taking the store with you, not actually what you fill out on the paper.
Andrew?
Yes.
On that one. The time frame from when you had the original data to when you collected it was only a year. And do you think that the data were just that bad, or is it turnover, or what's your differences?
So I've worked with various data sets and where they get it. So NAICS Association, I found out, buys it from Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet updates their database consecutively. Reference USA, which you guys have access here through the library, updates theirs less than that. It's quarterly. They just bought it in 2012, and they were selling it, unbeknownst to me. It was just, we saw it in the literature. We're like, okay, let's go to this data source. And then after this whole process, I realized I need a better data source because this resulted in 55,000 miles driven by myself. I spent numerous times in a car. My wife was not happy because so that was one reason why I went to Truth Initiative. They paid my research costs, so it was very nice. But my wife wasn't happy because we were planning our wedding during this time period. Yeah. And it was good to go to West Virginia because I had plenty of friends that actually moved to the southern part of the state, where my one friend, I ended up crashing on his couch, I think a total over this month period, a full month and a half. His wife probably didn't like me. By the end of the time, I hardly even saw her. The door was just unlocked, and I went to my room.
Yeah, so I just wanted to not ask you a question, but just share. If anyone is enthralled with the idea of spy glasses, I have them, the same ones that Andrew used, so we can talk.
And so I'm partnering, I'm presenting a poster next month at the American Association of Public Opinion Research on the methodology used that we've begun. And it's in a partnership with NORC at the University of Illinois, Chicago. It's coming along a lot better, and the idea is to actually build a tool that we can then just put photos in and then press play, and it'll output you a data set nice and clean. To actually looking at accurately classifying product types and brands, we're at about 85 to 89% reliability. So in this study, I wanted to look at influential tobacco retailer density. So when I mean influential, I wanted to use a weighted kernel density estimation approach, and I wanted to weight it by exterior marketing, because my hypothesis behind this was even though there's density, there would have been a lot more exterior marketing nearer to schools than what you would find further away to schools. They were really trying to hook their middle school and high school students. And this kind of came to me in Wheeling, West Virginia. There was a store right across from a middle school that had a fence, and the fence had over 20 ads facing the school. And it was right off a bridge. So right when you go from Ohio right into Wheeling, there's a gas station right on the side, on the right-hand side, and you'll see the fence driving by. It's pretty amazing. I mean, there were ads on top of ads. I population weighted using the quartile breaks. The final density surface used a Gaussian kernel, and again, I didn't use a 6.5 mile in this. I optimized this because, again, these were small county areas, the individual counties that weren't contiguous. So I do have edge effects in this study as a limitation. And the resulting cell size is every pixel or every 30 meters actually had an associated density value. For proximity, I used network routes, and I actually removed restrictions because I wanted to look at walkable access. By default in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS, they actually use drive distance or street distance. Humans don't have to obey one-way roads, especially in DC. When you actually try to calculate proximity, you're going around circles. Humans just don't walk that way. Then I examined the relationship between tobacco outlet density and tobacco retailer proximity to the public middle schools and high schools using a chi-square test and a sieve diagram. I categorized tobacco retailer density by quartiles, and I calculated the tobacco retailer proximity in less to a mile to a school, 1 to 2 miles, 2 to 5, and then greater than 5 miles. And then we use three-way fixed effects ANOVA models and interaction plots to assess the effects and interactions of the proximity density groups, non-metro and metro status of the county, as well as store type on exterior tobacco marketing cigarette pack price. We kind of reclassified this again to create these proximity density groups, just dichotomizing it, and I wanted to look at kind of local near proximity, so less than a mile to school was considered close proximity, where greater than a mile was considered far proximity. And then I used a median split and then created a close proximity low density group, a close proximity high density group, and et cetera for the far proximities. So overall, there was an average of 46 tobacco retailers per county, and the number and type of tobacco retailers found within, whether it was a metro or non-metro county, was almost equally distributed, which was kind of shocking to see. I wasn't expecting that, but that's data. The results found that metro tobacco retailers displayed significantly more exterior tobacco marketing than metro, kind of what we hypothesized. And as expected, the metro tobacco retailers were significantly more likely to be located more densely together, so they were more clustered together, and also closer to schools than in non-metro counties. And schools' accessibility to influential tobacco retailers was significantly higher in metro schools than in non-metro schools, where 39% of the middle/high schools had an above average tobacco retailer density. And of that 39%, 77% of those schools were actually located in metro counties. So this is the weighted. I actually ran this as unweighted. So you have the school locations and the density surface. Again, you see the edge effects. When you calculate, it creates a bounding envelope. So your farthest tobacco outlet this way and the farthest tobacco this way, it's going to create a bounding envelope to actually create your density surface. That's where it's actually going to be calculated within. And the unweighted compared to the weighted, and I don't have it here, but the weighted actually shifts, especially in the metro, the non-metro. These are the non-metro counties here. They actually shift towards the schools, the density. So they are actually located where more influential tobacco retailers that are actually, the density's higher, there's more of them, but they're also displaying more exterior marketing. And in the sieve diagram, the overall pattern of association, the blue, actually is what we hypothesized. And over 70% of the tobacco retailers observed this pattern. But what was interesting, and the reason why we need to look at the interrelationships, is 58% or 45 of these store outlets actually had a low density, but are also located less than 2 miles to schools. So why? So we have to wonder what's going on there.
I've never seen a diagram like this. Can you walk us through it?
So it's similar to almost like a correlation matrix. So you have the pattern of association, what we'd expect. So you have close proximity, low density, high proximity, high density. So you'd expect the further away, the lower the density would be. So the blue is the pattern association, and the numbers inside are actually the retail counts, the number of stores. If you guys use R, very easy. And actually this is what actually made us explore it more, was just because of these. Less than a mile and being located within low density is really fascinating. It could be kind of a non-metro effect, but actually looking at the data, it wasn't a non-metro. We were seeing it in metro too. It could be just a lot. West Virginia has county schools, and Ohio has municipality. It could be that the county schools were just located centrally in the county, away from kind of the built environment. Actually, I paused it, my bad. Because here, one thing to point out, these urban counties, Lincoln's very kind of borderline urban. Actually, in the new release of the urban-rural continuum codes, it actually falls out of being considered urban. It's actually on the outskirts of Kanawha County. These actually take in urban planning known as a monocentric and a polycentric kind of a view, where these are actually kind of the cities without, so it's kind of modeling the built environment, if you really want to think about it. But this fascination is interesting because you also have another 33 schools that are between 2 and 5 mile, let me rephrase that again. 33 retailers that are located in very high density areas. So they're located within other retailers, but they're located very far away from schools. So it's a kind of weird pattern, and it's a reason why we actually need to compare and contrast proximity and density. And when you calculate density within, say, a half mile, you're actually calculating the density within inside a half mile proximity to that school or home. For exterior tobacco marketing, significant two-way interaction existed between proximity density groups as well as store type. We actually collapsed store type as well. So these are tobacco-specific stores, pharmacies, and then these are grocery stores, gas stations, and convenience stores. And as you can see, you can see that within the relative density, so high density, as you actually move further away, tobacco stores actually have increased tobacco marketing the further you actually go away. However, when you have very low density and you're very close, very high, but this could be a small cell size. There's only 3 of these retailers. Among price, we actually observed a 3-way interaction between store type, price, and non-metro status. You can see that pharmacies in low density areas actually had significantly higher prices than anything else. But one thing to actually note as I go from metro to non-metro's interaction plot, what you see in the literature is closer to schools, there's a lower price. You see that in the literature all the time. And we do see that. So given the relative levels of density, so in low density areas, less competition, price is about the same as you move. But as what's different than this in high density areas, so where you have higher competition, as you actually move away from schools, the price actually decreases. And this is seen dramatically patterned among all store types. So this, by comparing and contrasting proximity and density simultaneously, we actually see that price, given relative levels of density, higher or lower density, price actually decreases the further away you actually move from schools. And it could be that as you move away from schools, you're actually moving into neighborhood environments. So the prices are actually lower around houses maybe than what schools are. Again, that gets to that proximity where they're seeking it out, so it's cheaper around their houses. So to wrap up, the study successfully explored how retail marketing and pricing practices varied spatially in terms of both retailers' density and proximity to schools. As hypothesized, a significant relationship existed between tobacco retailer density and proximity to schools, and our approach allowed us to contrast density and proximity in a novel way, identifying groups of retailers within different levels of each. Future studies examining point-of-sale influences on youth smoking behavior surrounding youth activity spaces need to account for all the outlets within the youth's physical environment, and it should examine how variations in point-of-sale mechanisms, price, advertising, and location might influence youth smoking given the interrelationships between both density and proximity. Thank you, and is there any more questions?
So I'm just curious, are you two going to do this, you have all the things that are the next steps of this, is that, okay.
Do you want to talk about what we were working on yesterday?
So me and Erica kind of met at, it's been a couple of years now, and we actually realized the PRC conferences when we probably first ran into each other and didn't even realize it. But I was showing her and talking to her about the spy glasses. She's like, I got to get the spy glasses. I'm like, yeah, you need to get the spy glasses. And some of the mobile applications to do surveillance that we do in-house. And kind of reaching out, we submitted an R21 looking at the spatial uncertainty of various databases and the spatial uncertainty in these various density estimation approaches. And to build our collaboration to strengthen the R21, it did get scored. We did have a reviewer. We're going to resubmit it. And to build that collaboration, we're working on a paper looking at e-cig youth among the middle school YRBS. And we're actually going to compare and contrast retail density and proximity to the various schools. And now I have outcome data in that you guys do comprehensive census. I've been trying to do the same thing in DC, and the DC superintendent's office won't even let us de-identify down the ward. They refuse to do ward. And ward's a large area. There's multiple schools. It's only district-wide analysis. So actually being able to look at and pull in additional factors like proximity to parks as well is going to be a gold mine worth of data. It should be interesting findings.
You mentioned that we have access to tobacco retailer data through ODH. Would you trust that data, or would you need to confirm it in the same sort of way that you look at your own?
It's a good question, and that's been up in debate into the field for a long time. Reference USA purchased their business from, did they purchase their data from Dun & Bradstreet? Dun & Bradstreet's the one that actually gives a business their DUNS number. So as soon as they get their DUNS number, they're classified by a primary industry. That gives them their NAICS code, and then they sell their data. Reference USA, owned by Info USA. So Info USA actually has more updated data, but Info USA is, I would go and get Info USA because I'm a non-academic institution. Ref USA, part of their education agreement, is to give it to libraries, which isn't updated that well. Lisa Hendrickson Group out at Stanford, as well as Kurt Ribisil down at UNC, they've used Dun & Bradstreet as well as Ref USA, which totally is overestimating their estimates. And Lisa's reached out to me recently to collaborate on a PO1 grant to actually redo their UO1 grant, where they went out to 33 cities, 60 outlets, and did store audits in 33 cities. So, no, 30 cities, so 1,800 outlets nationwide. And she wants to actually match up. So our current Dun & Bradstreet, we also clean it through machine algorithms. And actually, we've actually gone through by hand and actually spot checked and called. She wants to kind of match it up to ours to see actually how good it is. And that's kind of a work in progress. Maybe get to in the fall, next December, possibly. She's trying to find a way how to share the data through a data user agreement with us. But the best way is to field validate. If you can't take field validation, you can only call, you can clean so well. Working with UPenn on one study in Philadelphia, and I was telling Elaine this and Erica this last night, there was a grocery store or a convenience store that had a different name, same address, same telephone number, that then changed its name the following year. And we have a year founded variable in the Dun & Bradstreet, so we can actually see what year it's founded. Changed to a grocery store, different owner, different year founded date, same location, same address, same telephone number. And then the following year, it went back to a convenience store. So it's actually not only are you adding locations, so 3 locations that are really one, you're also changing and misclassifying the business type if you actually delete the wrong one. So without the year founded variable, you could have had one more grocery store when it's really a convenience store. So it's a lot of cleaning. Again, we're working with NORC. We bought Dun & Bradstreet data. We downloaded it 2 years ago, January 12th, and we re-downloaded it exactly 18 months later. So we have what we consider a 2015 data set and a 2016 with exactly an 18-month lag because they update daily. And we've actually, from the process we learned in the cleaning process and the deduplication, so like strip outlet mall effects, we actually re-cleaned this data faster and actually built a process to look at what variables we need to do, identify which ones need manually check them, and we're going to actually compare and actually see the built environment where density's actually increased and where density's decreased, and what are the underlying kind of geographic and planning relationships there. So where is density actually increasing within the retail environment? Where is it decreasing? Why? Is it economics? Is it the housing market, just people moving out and businesses are shuttering? So what's changing the retail environment over time? What are those environmental and social environment contexts? Yes.
Just want to make a comment, just like for perspective. I think you mentioned in your study, was there about roughly 46 retailers per county?
Yes.
So I think in Cleveland alone, we have somewhere over 500 retailers.
DC has 736.
Right. time it's going to take to like ground truth?
We ground truth DC in a summer, and we have technology that we've been talking about that can be done on a tablet, mobile phone, that kind of tracks field workers. Everything's mobile based. It goes straight into a database, nice and clean. You can capture photos at the point of sale. Everything's done in real time, and you can actually start running analytics, looking at how many store types are captured, how many photos, what's the median price of the stores captured to date, and everything's visualized in real time. That's where me and Erica might go. But it's a way we're trying to partner with DOH to redo. We call it posse. It's the point of sale surveillance. We call it the posse. So you get a posse together and round up the posse and go out and collect data. But that's kind of what we're trying to do back. We're trying to go back out in DC and do it because it was done in 2012. If we can do it this summer, we can actually look at differences within the retail environment with a 5-year lag.
We do this every summer here with retail, but do you do the tobacco one? Do you also collect tobacco?
It's always a part of the...
When did that start? So we've had 3 years or 4 years, 3 years ago?
Oh, that's 6 years.
6 years.
12 years.
So we can look at pricing differences by neighborhood. I'm not even going to talk about this, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's some variables that we've got. By putting it not on paper and actually making it mobile and being able to insert complex skip patterns, you're going to also add more questions and still make it as efficient as a paper-based survey.
Can you say just a little bit more about that? Is it a tablet? Is it a different software?
So it's called Survey 123 by ArcGIS, as well as Workforce by ArcGIS. They're mobile-based. You develop it, deploy it on your server, and it's cross-platform. So once you develop it for one product, it automatically goes cross-platform. So you build it once, you don't need to hire a developer to make a tablet version or a web-based version. It's already done. You can also, where we actually have access, where we're actually customizing it and actually going to publish it to eventually, this is my long-term goal, to publish it to the iTunes store and Google Android. So instead of actually developing for Google and Android-based and then developing for iOS, typically you do Android because it's easier, you don't have the restrictions, and then iOS. Esri actually has an app developer where as soon as you press send, it automatically sends both out because you're building it on their pre-approved platform by iOS and Android. So you're just filling in the content. You're using their form and background code to form the structure. So you already know it's going to get pretty much pre-approved and faster deployment. And then you can brand it and market it however you want it.
Yeah.
Two related questions. Because of changes that are occurring in tobacco initiation, both moving away from cigarettes to alternative tobacco products and the increase in age of initiation, particularly among the young adult group. One, we thought about adding colleges and universities to this mapping. You may be aware that that's been done with alcohol, and those results are truly impressive in terms of alcohol deals, happy hours, so forth, near college campuses. Have you thought about looking at the price point of products other than cigarettes as part of the survey process?
So for Posse, Jen Cantrill and I published on little cigars, cigarillos. We actually did a predictive. If I plugged in my hard drive, I could show you maybe after this. If you picture Washington, D.C. census tracts and actually break out the African American population by quartiles, and you actually take, when we went out to all 753s, we captured lowest pack price, lowest menthol pack price, as well as little cigar cigarillo, lowest pack, lowest single pack, or however they sell them. And we actually created a predictive surface of the price point for LCCs. And that price point, which is very similar, it uses Kriging, which is an interpolation kind of method with a distance decay function. Actually found the price across DC varied between 80 cents and $1.30. And if you take that surface map, and it's actually the map in the paper, I think it's in the American Journal of Public Health, side by side, they're identical. So you can't say they're not targeting, even though we can't say they're targeting. With e-cigarettes, it's kind of hard to pull them into the Dun & Bradstreet. We've tried this. There are some in our list, kind of going through by name. They're classified as tobacco retailers, but what we also found is there are also small appliance stores. There are also transistor companies, all types of random ones. And we get a URL, and you can click on the URL, and it takes you, and it's like, I would have never thought of this. I spent probably, when you get access to Dun & Bradstreet, you kind of get like a dashboard where you can actually search various NAICS codes and actually see what stores come up. And I literally spent like a whole week just trying to identify, and it was too hard. And it was unrealistic. For Cleveland, we went straight to Yelp. We got all 9, geocode them, throw them in with your guys' data, so we're able to look at vape included in the standard NAICS categories in the complete retail audits.
Colleges?
Colleges, I actually have a national database of all colleges. We've thought about doing some stuff around HBCUs because that's a big, our community and youth engagement is actually doing a lot with HBCUs to get them to go smoke-free, and as well as some other schools too. It's our smoke-free initiative, and we were thinking about doing some HBCUs, but there's just not enough time in the day, and I'm a one-man shop. I was kind of telling Erica this, so I manage our servers or IT, but then I do all the analysis, so I'm an analyst too, and then also as a doc trying to write my own grants, I'm a research investigator too, so I wear 3 hats. It's fun, and it's a common occurrence in kind of a spatial epidemiology. You're a one-man crew. It's how fast you can train people internally. Any other questions?
Comments, questions?
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.